Hey folks, it's Michael again from the Kids Library. So this is our second 3D printing class we're doing at home, and today I am going to show you a couple of new tricks in Tinkercad, and then we are going to use those to make our own flower pots. If you haven't already, please watch my 3D printing class from last month. It's on our YouTube channel, down here, and then the link to this is also going to be in the description of this video. In the first 3D printing class, I covered up how to sign up for Tinkercad, which is the workspace we're using, and then I covered the basics of Tinkercad design. Some of the stuff I'm doing today is going to be a little more advanced, so please check out the first class. Okay, let's get into Tinkercad here, and we're going to start by creating a new design. So, let me just click and drag some shapes in here. In our first class, I showed you how to combine some shapes and make some pretty cool stuff. You can combine it with the group button up here. But there is not only a way to combine stuff, you can also take parts away. And so I didn't use this last class, so I'm going to do a little demonstration. So let's get rid of this stuff. And let's start by taking another box, and we are going to make it bigger and a little shorter. And then we are going to get another cylinder. And so when we select a shape, there's a menu up top here, up and to the right. Right now it's selected as solid and then the orange color. There's an option next to it called hole, and so when you click that, it changes the shape to a hole. It's a little confusing, but what this lets us do is punch a hole into another shape and make it hollow. So now we take this hole shape and we move it into another shape, like the square like this, and they overlap. And so then we select both of them, click and drag, and then there's the group button up here. And ta-da! We got a lot more of an interesting shape now. And don't forget, if you want to get a better angle to look at the shape, hold right click and then move the mouse around. That's what moves the camera. And so let me try one more time with a different shape. Let's get a box again. Now let's get a semicircle. So we're going to make like a tunnel here. So we're going to make this semicircle a hole. And whenever you're doing this, you want the hole to be either equal to the length of what you're making a hole into or longer. Like I have this semicircle much longer than the box's width. And so now we select and we group. And there we go. We're making a little tunnel. That's not the only thing that hole option here can do though. It's not just for making holes in other shapes necessarily. Another cool thing that we can do with it is erase and take off entire parts of a shape. Okay, let's get rid of this. So let's say I want half of a sphere to use in some kind of project, but in the shapes menu there's only a full sphere. What we can do is erase half of it using that hole option. So what we do is we get a box, and then we make that box a hole. It turns transparent. And then we drag it here so that half of that sphere is in that box. And where they overlap, all of that is going to get erased. So now, if I select both of them and I hit the group button, now I've got half of a sphere to work with and use for whatever I want to do. Alright, so now let's put our skills to the test and get started on that flower pot. So I've got some pieces of it here that I already made just to help us along. For now, I'm just going to move that out of the way. Okay, and so to start, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a cylinder, and we are going to make it 50 millimeters. So we click on the corner here and we can change the length, type in millimeters. So we type in 50 and then we type in 50 here. To change the height, we click this white thing at the top and then we can click here and change the height, and we're going to make that 45 millimeters tall. There we go. Alright, here comes the tricky part. I showed you a little bit ago how to cut off parts of shapes using that hole option. Now we are going to do that with the cone shape. Let's drag it over here to get a shape we want for the flower pot. And so we drag the cone in there, and we're just going to drag a plain old cylinder in here. Want to kind of get it right where the cone is. And we're going to change that cylinder to a hole. And to cut off the part, we got to make sure it's like exactly on the cylinder. It's a tiny bit off. Okay, there we go. And to make sure we cut off the part that we want, we're going to use this black arrow to move the cylinder up from the ground. We're going to move it up 7. So if you see that thing there, it shows us that we moved it up 7. Okay, there we go. And now we are going to do what we did earlier. We're going to group these two, select them, okay, hit group, and now we have the shape that we want to use for the flower pot. Okay, and I am just going to change the color of this to orange to match the cylinder we have. Okay, and so we are going to take that part of the cone and we are going to rotate it. And to rotate it, we click and we drag these curvy arrows at the top right here where my mouse is, and we are going to click, drag, and then to the right we're going to turn it upside down all the way to 180 degrees. There we go, perfectly upside down. Now we are going to change the size of that piece of cone we just made. So we're going to click on the box here in the corner, and it's going to show us those measurements. And we are going to change it to 72. So we click on it and type in 72 millimeters long, and then 72 millimeters wide, and then if we click on the top here, we can change the height to 20 millimeters tall. There we go. Then we are going to move this thing up, and we're going to move it up using this black arrow on top. We're going to move it 42 millimeters up. Let's count all the way to 42. There we go. Let's zoom out a little bit and move the camera just so we get a better perspective. And then we are going to drag this over, and it overlaps just the way we want it. Looks good. Let's look at it from other angles. Okay, it looks great. And so now we are going to click and drag and select, and then group. There we go. So now we've got our flower pot, but we still need to hollow it out. Thankfully, there's a easier way of doing that. So if we select our flower pot, what we're going to do is either Control-C or use the copy button here, and then we're going to Control-V or use the paste button here, and that makes a copy of our flower pot. And we're going to do the same thing we did. We're going to make it a hole, except we are going to change our duplicate here. We are going to make it 65 instead of 72 by 65. There we go. And so that we don't hollow it out entirely and there's not a bottom, we're going to move it 3 millimeters up. And then we are going to make it a hole. There we go. Now we overlap it with the thingy, flower pot, and then we click and drag, group, and there we go. If we want it to look a little nicer, we can add a tube at the top. We drag it out here. We're going to change the size like we did with everything else to 75 long, 75 wide, and it's 10 tall. That's perfect. So now we're going to move it over here, and then we are going to move it all the way up about 56 or so millimeters up from the ground, and then we're going to make sure It's nice and even. Always make sure to look around with the camera to make sure it's actually working. Okay, great. And now we group that. We're almost done, but there's still a couple of things that we need to add. So when you water flowers, flower pots have a little small hole at the bottom and a little plate/bowl to drain the excess water. So we're going to make that. Thankfully it isn't too hard. We're just going to grab a little old cylinder and then we're going to make it a hole. And let's make it a little smaller. Let's make the height 10. And then it's going to 10 and then also 10. There we go. And then we're going to do it so that it overlaps the bottom. Now we drag everything again and hit group. There we go. We've got that small hole for the water to go out of. And now let's make a little tray. And to make the tray, we are going to grab yet another cylinder and we are going to change it to, it's going to be 8 millimeters high. It's going to be 60 millimeters long and 60 millimeters wide. And then we are going to copy it, and then we're going to paste it, and we're going to change it to 55 instead of 60, and then 55 instead of 60. Then we're going to make it a hole. There we go. We're going to overlap it with this thing here, but first we got to make it a couple of millimeters off of the ground so it doesn't just go through the whole thing. And we still have a solid bottom. There we go. Let's just make sure that looks right. Perfect. We click and drag. We are going to group one last time. And we are finished. We are going to keep these two separate because we want two pieces. We'll just put, if we print it out, we'll just put it on top of here. So then when we water the plant, all the excess water will drain into that little tray. And you know what, actually let's make this a little bigger, just so water doesn't leak out. A couple of things I wanted to mention. 3D printing is back! Woo! Yay! Now 3D printing can actually be 3D. So how you submit it is you go on our website here, you go to create and then make your equipment, submit your 3D prints here. The form itself is the same as it used to be. You upload your file, you choose all of these, you put your contact info. The catch is that to pay for the print, they add it as a fine to your library card or your parents' library card, and then what you can do is pay the fines online and then you can pick up them at the drive up. And if anyone watching was in the March 3D printing class, it was right before we closed, and you still want your 3D print, call or email us and let us know, kids@elmlib.org, and we will print it out for you. I hope you all have a creative and awesome day.